So to begin, I'd like to ask you all, do any of you know what is Anthropocene? Any guesses? So Anthropocene is a geological era in human history where we have significantly and irreversibly altered the planet's ecosystem and its climate. It sounds concerning, right? But this is what Anthropocene looks like in our cities today. With climate change, we are affecting our environment more so in developing countries like India, where most of the infrastructure is actually outdated or unregulated. So on that note, I'm Manushi Ashok Jain, an architect and urban designer, and I'm here today to share my journey as a woman in the field of urban design and planning, tackling some of these issues like climate change and its associated risks. So how did my journey begin? I belong to a small town in Rajasthan, which is surrounded by nature and has a population of about 15,000 people. But I've spent most of my life in Chennai, where I grew up and studied architecture. But my love for traveling and my experience of working across architecture in different cities has led me to practice in some of the most densely populated cities in the world. I then went on to do my master's in New York City, where I also happened to work in some of the most high-ended luxurious homes in USA. So after doing that for 2 years, I started to wonder, as a woman designer, how can I actually do more? How can I actually uplift the society and help tackle all these large issues that we are facing? So then I moved to Boston and joined Sasaki Associates. It's a very reputed urban design and planning firm, and here I had the opportunity to work on the strategic development framework for 5 cities in Afghanistan. I also had the opportunity to work under the guidance of the ex-president of Afghanistan, Dr. Ashraf Ghani, on this project, and it was truly an honor. So in this project, I'll run you through some of the most significant stories. So one of it was Mazar-e-Sharif, where we worked on the old city center, where the famous Blue Mosque is located, and proposed design strategies for greening, densification, enhancing livelihoods, and promoting heritage tourism. In Afghanistan, public spaces are not very safe for women. So we designed women's centers across the city to help empower them and make them feel safe and free. We also looked at this project in Kandahar, which was the Babawali Heritage Shrine, where we looked at how we can leverage natural ecosystems and create more livelihood, promote ecotourism, and make it an integral part of the city. So through all of this and these experiences, I started thinking, if we can do this in a country like Afghanistan, which is war-torn, why can't we simulate any of these things in India? So I packed my bags, left my job, and moved to India. Here with some friends and colleagues, I started this firm called Sponge Collaborative. We are a bunch of interdisciplinary experts located in multiple cities in India as well as in USA. And why we are called the Sponge Collaborative is because we promote the Sponge City approach through our projects that focus on nature-based solutions and integrates blue-green infrastructure, mobility, housing to create vibrant public spaces. So let me explain to you what I mean by the Sponge City approach. In a typical urban fabric, most of the surfaces are impermeable. We've lost a lot of our green and natural ground. So when there is an event of heavy rainfall or a cloud burst, we experience increased runoff and flooding. But when we start to leverage nature and green within our open spaces, streets, buildings and roofs, we then create a resilient infrastructure which actually has a lot of benefits like flood mitigation, aquifer recharge, rainwater harvesting. And it also has a lot of co-benefits like urban greening, microclimate enhancement, urban farming, reducing pollution and upgrading our public realm. This is a need of the hour in many different Indian cities. How are we doing this? We are actually propelling the Sponge City approach in 3 different scales. We're looking at it in a planning framework scale, the open spaces and street scale, as well as the architectural scale in buildings. So I'll start by explaining the Sponge planning framework through 3 different projects. The first one is this project that we did in Chennai called the Sponge Handbook. This is the basins level approach in understanding the blue-green systems of our cities. Chennai was a city abundant in wetlands, lakes, temple tanks and rivers that acted like natural sponge landscapes. But a lot of this is lost due to increase in urbanization, as you can see in the image on the right. Now because of this, Chennai goes through a cycle of floods and droughts. And this became Quite popular thanks to Leonardo DiCaprio Instagramming about it in 2019, and hence a global issue. What we do is we talk to municipal authorities and governments and show them that if they do nothing about the situation, then what is going to happen? Urbanization will continue to increase. Chennai is going to lose much of its natural sponge landscapes, and we are going to have increased floods and droughts. But if we take the sponge basin scenario approach, we're going to be able to protect existing sponge landscapes and try to create more blue-green infrastructure that can help in delaying the runoff, storing water for the summer season, and slowly releasing it into the aquifers. And how we propose to do this is by creating a catalog of blue-green infrastructure toolkits that can be plugged in different scales from streets to open spaces to buildings, and they can be used by multiple stakeholders or planners. And when implemented, this is what our streets would look like. And the core benefit is that it is not only stormwater infrastructure, but it is also going to add greenery and biodiversity. So when you actually start doing these small interventions through pilot project scales, you will be able to upgrade your public realm, you'll be able to unlock the potential for development, and you will thus create a resilient future. So we have also demonstrated this in sponge neighborhoods, where if you take a transit-oriented development and you turn it into a mixed-use high-rise development, which is integrated with these sponge landscapes, then you can create resilient sponge neighborhoods that can coexist with nature. We demonstrated that through visuals of how the city can start looking like once you start making these changes. The second project I'm going to talk about today is the Integrated Mullasery Canal Framework project. It is much like Chennai, where they also face issues of flooding, but here they also have added layer of issues such as solid waste management as well as unsafe streets for women and children. So we looked at this particular neighborhood within the city, which is in Ernakulam, and as you can see, the blue areas were the areas that were flooding. We introduced the sponge green streets and sponge open spaces as critical infrastructure that can then help in the controlled flooding of certain areas, and thus during the event of heavy rainfall or cloud burst, it allows the city to still continue functioning. Now we did this through 3 different toolkits. So apart from looking at nature-based solutions, we also looked at mobility and inclusivity here. And we have promoted Adapt, Connect and Empower, where Adapt is a nature-based solutions toolkit, Connect is a public realm and mobility system toolkit, and Empower is the community toolkit to manage solid waste from a bottom-up approach. We also identified local champions through this, and we wanted to actually make it a community-oriented framework. So with that, while we were engaging with the stakeholders on this project, we had the opportunity to meet Kudumbashri, which is a woman-led self-help group. They help in women empowerment by providing jobs and skill development. In Kochi, they help in decentralized waste collection. Now through this project, we introduced decentralized waste centers for the neighborhood, and that could actually collect, segregate and upcycle waste. We also proposed these community groves in the backyards where women, children and elders could gather, play and relax. So through this, we also got to know that you can create a circular system within your cities where you're able to grow your own food and compost your own waste. So the third project I'm going to talk about is the Adyar Basin vision that ties urban growth with ecological rejuvenation. Adyar River is one of the most urbanized and significant rivers in Chennai that experiences both flooding and garbage disposal in the river. And we looked at the Adyar River through multi-sectoral lenses, where Adyar is an ecological corridor that connects these different ecosystems within the city, where it behaves like a critical infrastructure with a riparian and resilient edge, where we also created heritage trails along the river and used the river as a connecting tool. And we looked at Adyar River as an open space amenity which can actually create recreational and well-being. We also looked at it as a corridor for strategic development and created this framework that demonstrates how all these different projects come together can actually change the way we live in our city. And when completed together, the Adyar River could transform to become a very resilient, water-sensitive urbanization tool. So the second scale I'm going to talk to you all about today is the sponge open space and street. So the planning projects are quite large in scale and hence they can take a lot of time to actually get implemented. But through this sponge open space and street, we are able to do quick win projects like this one in Coimbatore, where we looked at an open space reservation land and we try to leverage it as a multifunctional green system that enhances biodiversity, blue system that actually helps in stormwater management, and as a social system that can actually create social cohesion and integration. So we did the same for a street project in MG Road in Kochi, where we demonstrated how an existing street can be taken up, which has a lack of sidewalks, street lights, and is unsafe for women and children, and can be converted into a great critical infrastructure with rain gardens, bioswales, and tree pits that can actually be used to delay the water that is going into the stormwater drain and hence create a great public realm and boulevard. So this is what the vision would look like once it's implemented with streetlights, streeters, pavilions, and bicycle lanes. Now the third scale I'm going to talk to you about is how from landscape we are also able to adapt this into buildings and architecture. And this is a project where a client of ours came and said that they wanted to do a renovation project. But we looked at it from a lens of climate adaptive retrofit and proposed to provide all of the requirements that they have, but also make it sustainable by bringing in green walls, green roofs, and creating a building that could be water resilient as well as energy efficient. So currently what we are doing is we are taking this concept and we are proposing it to the Greater Chennai Corporation and the Municipal Development Authority. We've had certain wins where we are engaged in some of these public projects. We're creating multiple sponge parks with the corporation to actually design an integrated stormwater management framework, and with the Chennai Metropolitan Development Authority, we're working on the Kilambakam bus terminal to promote a sponge park that can be used by all the transit travelers. But the journey so far has not been easy, and I'd like to share a personal experience. This is one of the first times I was in a municipal corporation building, and I was in this room with 40 to 50 engineers. And we were trying to propel and negotiate a nature-based approach, and I found to be the only woman designer. Heck, the only woman in that room. And it has been tough. So it's very important that we have diverse voices and genders actually making the case for nature-based solutions. So to me, a brave new world is one where communities, especially women, become resilient, where we can adapt and tackle the changes that are coming in our climate and be able to offer solutions. And that's the way we'll be able to tackle Anthropocene. Thank you.